I could be telling you about the ridiculous 4 consecutive victories of the Slovenian aliens Gregarios in the Tour de Suisse, where Adam Yates and Joao Almeida have improved their already hilarious power data and are threatening to take Poggi and the Saunier Duval team into outer space in the next Tour de France. But these 4 wins and doubles in a row for Dracula Gianetti's team have been caused largely by the stinking Swiss route, one based on stages with only one final pass and no descents to speak of, so that there are no fatalities as in other seasons. Now, there are many people guilty of producing this swill that we fans have had to eat. And perhaps the loudest voice of them all belongs to the president of the Association of Professional Cyclists, their union leader. He stands out, Mr. Adam Hansen. He's always been a meme in himself. After sharing a stable with dirty dopers like Patrick Sinkovitz, Michael Rogers, Axel Merckx, Sergei Gonchar, George Hincapie, Konstantin Sitsu or Michael Barry, Hansen became popular among fans for achieving an absurd record of finishing 20 consecutive Grand Tours, spanning the 2011 Vuelta a España, won by the White Kenyan with a TUE ahead of the doper Bison Kobo, all the way to the 2018 Giro d'Italia, also won by the White Kenyan with a sultry Disneylandis in Finestra exhibition. His career, running parallel to Chris Froome's, was very different from the guy stricken by parasites in his body. Hansen was content to occasionally win a few single stages, but never in the Tour de France. But most of all, he was loved by the fans because he didn't hesitate to drink nasty warm beers in plastic cups handed to him by the more drunk fans on the mountainside ditches. Hansen didn't hesitate to do so while fans recorded it all on their smartphones and screamed at the top of their voices while totally drunk, and all the while he continued to ply his trade. This gave him publicity and fame, the same fame that propelled him to become a union leader and succeed the doped Gianni Bugno as president of the CPA in March 2023. Since then, he's gone from being one of the most loved by the fans to one of the most hated. And his latest interview in the Spanish newspaper Relevo doesn't put him in a very good light at all. Now look, because we want you to love us, we're going to give you another chance to win a Van Rijssel bike by subscribing to our new celebrity channel, Celebs Highlights. There, for example, you can see the most doped actors in the history of cinema. Feel free to subscribe and leave a comment about the videos to participate. You have all the necessary information in the pinned comment. And now, let's get on with exposing Adam Hansen. We won't deny it, Adam Hansen has done some things right. Only a few, but they are worth mentioning, because here at this channel, we don't hate anyone. We just expose their actions in hilarious videos for you. Now, one of the positives is extending the absurd rule from the final 3 kilometers to the final 5 kilometers in flat stages. Stages which invariably involved climbers and classics riders watching the peloton closely in the dangerous final kilometers, only to lose time in the general classification through crashes or punctures. Another positive is the beginning of the end of the headphones that Lance and Johan made so fashionable in their doped Tour de France 1999. Now, Hansen is only doing this for safety, but nevertheless fans will applaud all measures that encourage a more natural, less artificial spectacle, with less weight and influence on the directors, and more weight and influence on the riders themselves on the road. 2 excellent measures sponsored by Mr. Hansen, you see. The problem is that everything else, absolutely everything else, runs against the fans. He himself says so in the interview. I don't give a damn about the cycling fans, I'm only in charge of ensuring the safety of the cyclists. Of course, he doesn't care about the fans now. Once upon a time, when he had to be pedalling and receiving disgusting boiling lager beers, and they asked for photos and you continued with the spectacle of the 20 Grand Tours consecutively, then you wanted to be close to the fans, but now, in a suit and tie, Mr. Hansen, he's not so keen on pandering to the wishes of the fans. Hansen is not only a worker who gets promoted in the company and then becomes a real arsehole, he also doesn't hesitate to throw shit at his former boss at the CPA, so you can imagine the character of this former nice guy. First, by emphasising what an accomplishment it was to be president of the CPA while being Australian. He makes a big deal out of it, as if the Oceania giant is now a poor country with no resources and no history in professional cycling. For Hansen, his appointment to the top job of the Association for Professional Cyclists is comparable to the triumphs of the ever-clean Greg LeMond in the Tour de France 30 years ago, he said, a break from the European establishment in world cycling. Now, even if Mr. Hansen's grasp on dates is a little bit tenuous, since Greg already won his first Tour de France almost 40 years ago, Hansen's words are still ridiculous. The APC CPA was created in 1999, just days before the doped Pantani was caught in the Giro d'Italia. And who was its president then? The doper Francesco Moser. Hilarious. But even then, comparing the triumph of a gringo in a race that already had more than 70 years of history with your achievement, being appointed president of a union with 25 years of antiquity, well, it's nothing short of ridiculous. And then there were his words towards the doped Bunyo, former president of the union. Hansen, it seems, is a postmodernist, and as such, he bases his criticism of Bunyo on the fact that he was not prepared for today's times. The Italian dinosaur sent letters and didn't write on Twitter like Adam. He wasn't close to the riders, he said. It must be that Mr. Hansen has not seen the hundreds of photos of Mr. Bunyo surrounded by cyclists, some of them being legendary dopers, sanctioned for life. Now, it's good to be up to date. We don't deny it. Lance now does podcasts. But Mr. Hansen, why are you contradicting yourself in that interview in Relevo? The Australian claims that he accepted the position of president because he felt a duty, like maybe Spider-Man to the children of America. And he gave up a quiet life to be in the spotlight every day and do such a laborious and costly job. And yet this job does not prevent him from wanting to run for re-election in 2027, as he himself insists at the end of the interview. Just what is it about power, no matter how odious, that nobody wants to leave it once they've tasted it? Now, Hansen grows up when it comes to talking about his tweets and controversial decisions. For instance, there's the popular Arenberg chicane at Paris-Roubaix. Without naming anyone, but piecing together the clues that the goofy Hansen drops, we can see that he mentions Maxime Montfort, the Australian's teammate for almost 10 years at Lotto and Telecom. He must be the one who told him to slow down the entrance to Arenberg. Hansen thought about it and agreed. He then spoke to one of the directors of the hair-doping outfit, who also knew of his epocha as a cyclist. Now, it's possibly Jens Kerkelera, but we can't rule out Gianni Meersman or Frederick Willems. Whoever it was of the three, he initially told Hansen that they agreed with Montfort's proposal, but then right after, as the Australian bragged about this aberration of a chicane, the Belgian director of the Alpecin team ghosted Hansen and never spoke to him again. That is, he didn't dare tell him to his face what he thought, that the chicane was garbage. Such is the frightening power of Hansen. He scares the directors with his sensual blonde bad boy look. Ooh. Minutes later came the tweet from the son and grandson of dopers, humiliating Hansen, who then showed his anger at the Alpecin sport director with bravado along the lines of, "I do this for the riders and not for you dirty directors. We don't do this for the fans, fuck the fans." It's funny that this fool always mentions the fans, as if we, cycling fans from long before Hansen's time as a pro, are happy about crashes. We know they're part of cycling, Adam. We know you couldn't stop Gino Mader's death. We're not going to blame you for that, we wouldn't try. We never rejoice in misfortunes that injure or sideline stars like Jonas Vingegaard, or even the most humble final place last man in the worst small-town race on the planet. That should be clear to you. In the face of Van der Poel's humiliation, Hansen was quick to mention that he called him to explain everything. Can you imagine the grandson picking up his cell phone, thinking he was talking to Stefano Cecchini or the caddy from his golf games, and it's Adam Hansen calling? The Dutchman quickly dismissed him by telling him to see that if he can do anything else other than the ridiculous chicane next year. But Hansen remains proud that he reached an agreement with the most important rider in the classics today, the one who really interested him the most. He didn't realise that Van der Poel has laughed in his face twice. But since Hansen is not very enlightened, he still brags in the interview about having cut out the Stelvio stage from the Giro d'Italia, and in the face of pressure from the organisation. An organisation which at the same time was pressured by the fans. Oh, those evil fans, the great, great enemies of cycling. According to Adam, he took a vote on whether or not to go out in adverse weather conditions, and according to him, 100% of the cyclists backed his idea. It must be that he didn't see the numerous interviews with Poggi, the leader of the race, the main star of the Italian show, and the reason why so many people had moved to the Dolomites. People that, as you know, Hansen absolutely does not care about, not like in his days as a beer-swilling cyclist. Now, in those interviews, Tadej insisted again and again that he could participate perfectly well. He had no problem cycling in those conditions. It seems that Hansen was either completely unaware that the leading cyclist, the world #1, was against him, or he's calling him a lying pig. For Hansen, it seems that when snowflakes are falling or the temperatures are 2 degrees below zero, it's all too dangerous. And he insists that in the next meeting he has with the UCI of Selfie-La-Passion, he'll be happy if he can establish a minimum temperature and specific weather conditions so that riders cannot participate. That's his next goal. Can you be more pitiful? Well, yes, actually he can. The guy who was quickly silenced by Tymon Arensman's father when he went on Twitter to say that they shouldn't show images of cyclist crashes is proud that in the Basque Country, the 2024 race that has shaped this season, well, the dangerous curve was signposted on the road. Obvious, of course, but what about all those rocks that we could see near the mechanical wreckage of the bikes of Stef Kras and Focus in Evenepoel and our beloved Danish Anchovy? It's obvious that Safe Cycling, an organisation other than the UCI's Safe R that Hansen works with, well, they'd already told organiser Javier Eraso in January, 4 months before the race, that the Gladiator descent had to be removed. It had to be deleted because of its danger. But Hansen is happy enough that the road was signposted. That's how much he cares about the safety of the cyclists. That a rider died on a descent in Switzerland, let's remove all the descents. That the biggest stars fall on a very dangerous descent, let's signpost the bends. Just when you thought you couldn't say more stupid things in such a short time, Hansen went on. The journalist Daniel Arribas asked him about the implementation of yellow cards in cycling, that if you add up to 6 yellow cards you can get sanctioned for 30 days. And although Hansen signed the document in which these cards were implemented, he seemed to be not very familiar with how they work, since Arribas gave him the example of the Groenewegen-Jacobsen case. And for Hansen, when a guy almost sends another one to the grave, it's punishable by a yellow card. And this from the guy who claims that no one has done more for cyclists and their safety than him. Hansen, you're a disgrace. And also, when you are asked about your biggest mistake since being the president of the union, he doesn't mention any of this nonsense, but rather he's sorry for having trusted that Alpecin sport director who betrayed him and which led to everyone's mockery with the Van der Poel tweet. Now, Hansen doesn't care about doping. He cares about not having the financial resources to help cyclists who test positive to hire lawyers who can then search through the nooks and crannies of the law so that then some judge of zero intelligence can absolve UCI-sanctioned riders like Ibai Salas. Hansen would love to be able to pay for lawyers for Aseti de Coco Lopez, but he's not interested in the fight against doping, and he's not concerned that there are products that could endanger the health and safety of the cyclist. He's more concerned with temperatures, with cameras that don't record cyclists after crashes, or putting chicanes in the middle of the roads. And most of all, he wants the fans to be quiet and to be happy with what they're given. He wants them to swallow everything and continue to spend lots of money on bikes and subscriptions to GCN. Hansen is worried about the rain, but he's not worried about cyclists going to Saudi Arabia to earn huge amounts of money with sandstorms blowing in the faces. That's where Mr. Hansen doesn't have the balls to stand up to the sheikhs who put up the dough. With dinosaurs like Venier or Bonio, yes, but to those who really run the show, those he dare not criticise lest they cut off the tap, or you get kicked out of your post, or they take away the money earned by sitting in your chair and scratching your backside for hours on end. Or they might even take away the prominence that you're enjoying, a prominence that you never had in your cycling days. On these subjects, Mr. Hansen is strangely quiet.